Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The emperor never liked visiting the harem. The Empress Dowager constantly nags him about it. He must be tired of hearing it. So now he comes to the harem twice as often as before, but more than half of that time, he stays in your palace. As for me, I did not mind. When the emperor came, it was simple enough. He read books, I embroidered flowers. He slept on the bed, I slept on the couch. In any case, the couch had been replaced with a larger one. It was quite comfortable. The first time, I had even risen early to tidy the bedding beforehand. After all, everyone believed we began on the bed, moved to the couch, then returned to the bed again. Later, I grew too lazy to rise early and clean. Consort Joanne, however, was delighted. The emperor often took breakfast with her and the first prince afterward. One night, just as I was about to fall asleep, the emperor suddenly asked in the darkness, "How long have you been sleeping on the couch?" I thought for a moment. Not very long. Perhaps 3 months. He was silent for a while, then said, "You have endured much. Tomorrow morning, you shall be promoted to Mingjiaoyi. Thank you for your Majesty's grace." And thus, I rose to new heights of glory. I had been Mingjiaoyi for only 7 days when I began to suspect that women in the harem, once pregnant, all developed a penchant for mischief. Clara Chiu came to me again. She wished to sneak onto the road where officials passed during the morning court session to glimpse her father, the Marquis of Pinyuan. She had already devised a plan. Between the harem and the Qian Kun Hall stood a low wall. If I helped her just once, she was certain she could see him. I stared at her belly, already over 5 months along, and sternly warned her not to behave recklessly. Clara Chiu clung to me, weeping, "No one understands me. Will you not understand me either?" Very well, I understood. Ordinarily, when a concubine became pregnant, her family could enter the palace to visit. But Clara Chiu had lost her birth mother as a child. She had grown up relying solely on her father, the Marquis of Pinyuan. As a man, he could not enter the inner palace. A few days earlier, my own mother had finally been granted an official title and entered the palace to see me for the first time. Clara Chiu had been so envious she nearly died of it. She had clutched my mother and wept. Ah! I should mention, my mother had also shed a few tears in much the same manner, and so, Clara Chiu had resolved that no matter what, she would steal a glance at her father, whether I helped her or not, and so, I made a foolish decision. Perhaps life in the palace had been too smooth for me. Everything had gone too well, too comfortably. It had made me dizzy with complacency. Early the next morning, Clara Chiu pretended to invite me out for a stroll. Before we left, Consort Joanne even cheerfully reminded us to walk a little more. Good for a pregnant woman. When we reached the foot of a palace wall, Clara Chiu shot me a look. I understood immediately. Without hesitation, I crouched down in righteous solidarity, allowing her to step onto my shoulders and hoisting her upward. We worked together with effortless coordination, as fluid as flowing water and drifting clouds. After all, we had often done such things since childhood, I must admit, though Clara Chiu was over 5 months pregnant. Her agility remained much the same as before. The palace maids following us were utterly bewildered, frozen where they stood, but Clara Chiu, heavier now with pregnancy, weighed far more than she once had. My legs began to tremble under the strain. Gritting my teeth, I asked, "Do you see the Marquis of Pinyuan?" "No," she answered. "But I see your father. It's the first time I've ever seen him in court attire." I began imagining what my father looked like dressed in official robes, when suddenly, like thunder splitting the sky, a furious roar shattered the moment. Ming Jiaoyi. Beauty Qiu. Get down this instant. Mother of Heaven, noble consort Margaret had arrived. Clara Qiu startled violently and slipped. My mind went blank except for one thought. My godchild must not come to harm. I lunged desperately to catch her. The next instant, Clara Qiu landed squarely atop me, and I lost consciousness. I awoke from pain. The very moment I opened my eyes, I saw noble consort Margaret. I did not even dare to cry. She was the infamous iron-faced Yama of the palace, unyielding, merciless in discipline. This time, I had privately met an external male and nearly endangered an imperial heir. I would likely be cut into 10,000 pieces. Before I could speak, noble consort Margaret said coldly, I once thought you merely naive. I did not expect you to be a fool. She then pronounced my punishment. My title was stripped. I was to be sent to the cold palace. I looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings. Very well, I was already in the cold palace, but my chest throbbed with unbearable pain. I could not move. Through tears, I asked whether I might return to Xing Palace to recover first before being sent here. Noble consort Margaret's willow brows rose sharply. Even kings obey the law. On what grounds do you request an exception? Tears streamed down my face as I asked again, is Clara Qiu all right? Noble consort Margaret turned and left, muttering, heavens above, I only came to proclaim the decree. Why did I waste so many words on you? Summoning all my strength despite the pain in my chest, I called after her, please, do not let Prince Lucien know that I am being bullied in the palace. Her steps paused for a fraction of a second, then she walked away without looking back. The pain in my chest was excruciating. I lay there for what felt like half a day, unable to move. No one answered my calls. My heart trembled. In my mind floated every terrifying tale of the cold palace. White-haired palace maids singing at midnight, embroidered shoes appearing out of nowhere, ghostly faces at the window. Just as fear began to consume me, footsteps sounded outside. They drew closer. Then a woman's voice called softly, Lady Xiao. I screamed. A hand immediately covered my mouth. Before me stood a woman in palace attire, her hair loosely tied, looking strangely familiar. Consort Cecilia. She sat beside my bed, holding a bowl of herbal medicine. The imperial physician says you have 2 broken ribs, she said gently. Drink this. It will ease the pain. She fed me half a bowl of the bitter medicine. Do not be afraid, she continued kindly. When I first arrived, I was frightened too. Later I discovered this place is nothing like the terrifying stories. Then she smiled at me, I must thank you as well. Back then, you looked after me. I know you are kind-hearted. Consort Cecilia had once uttered a single sentence. I heard there are many peonies planted in Prince Lucien's residence, and for that, her leg had been broken and she was thrown into this place. She had once been the most dazzling dancer in the entire harem. Because that matter had involved Prince Lucien and me, I had always felt deeply guilty toward her. At the time, I had spent no small amount of silver bribing the guards and matrons of the cold palace to ensure she was properly cared for. Consort Cecilia did not seem to know the connection between Prince Lucien and me. She simply regarded me as a kind person and now devoted herself wholeheartedly to tending me. In the cold palace, meals and medicine were delivered from outside. But there were no servants to command. Everything had to be done by oneself. The weather was still hot. I lay bedridden, unable to move. Fearing I might develop heat rashes, Consort Cecilia limped back and forth, fetching clean water to wipe me down. Every day, Watching her limping figure busily caring for me, I felt an overwhelming weight of guilt and shame. After half a month, I was finally able to rise from bed. Consort Cecilia supported me as we took a stroll around the cold palace. Throughout the entire walk, I kept asking her in disbelief, "Are you certain this is truly the cold palace?" I could hardly be blamed for my ignorance. Though the furnishings were simple, everything was complete. Consort Cecilia explained that officials came regularly to inspect the place. If anything was broken, it was replaced immediately. In terms of comfort, it rivaled the finest guest residences I had once seen while traveling through Jiangnan with my grandmother. In the courtyard, Consort Cecilia had planted all manner of flowers. She truly loved flowers. Even the careless remark that had brought disaster upon her had been born of that love. It was also because she had truly been curious about the peony garden in Prince Lucien's residence. One afternoon, we sat beneath a trellis of blooming roses, drinking tea together. Consort Cecilia told me that when she had first arrived, she too could not believe the cold palace was like this. It was only after hearing the old matron who cared for her speak of it that she understood. The emperor's birth mother, she said, had once been confined in the cold palace. She had fallen ill, mad with grief, and died there. Because of that, Emperor Adrian felt deep sympathy for the women sent to this place. The moment he ascended the throne, he dismissed all the former inhabitants of the cold palace, allowing them to return to their natal families with stipends. He had the entire palace repaired and appointed specific attendants to oversee it. Consort Cecilia was the first concubine of this reign to be sent here. She felt that, aside from lacking freedom and having to work a little harder at daily tasks, there was little to complain about. Food and clothing were provided. In her leisure, she could plant flowers. She was already content. She even said that the emperor was kind-hearted. Otherwise, he would not have tacitly permitted me to bribe people to look after her. I could not help but sneer slightly. He broke your leg, and you still call him kind? Consort Cecilia smiled faintly. You do not know. The emperor rarely interferes in harem matters. It is the Empress Dowager and noble consort Margaret who make the decisions. Consort Joanne can occasionally speak a word or two. I do not know why the palace suddenly forbade any mention of Prince Lucien. She continued, but I do not mind this leg of mine. They say I once danced most beautifully in the harem. But no matter how well I danced, the emperor never once looked at me. When he did glance my way, he would unconsciously frown. I know his heart is burdened with the great affairs of the realm. I often feel that, to him, I am nothing but a weight. He comes to my palace periodically only so that I will not feel sorrowful. His eyes are fixed upon the world. His heart does not reside in the harem. I rested my chin upon my hand, listening to her words, recalling my own nights with the emperor. He read his books. I embroidered my flowers. It was true, everything seemed done out of duty. Like the completion of a task, and yet, every woman in the palace was as lovely as a flower. Noble consort Margaret was dignified and commanding. Consort Joanne was gentle and approachable. Consort Helena Minor was clever and radiant. Clara Chiu was innocent and sweet. Consort Cecilia herself was pure and moving. Lady Li possessed an elegance like a chrysanthemum. Wan Jiayu was brilliant as a peach blossom. Beauty Ho was charming in 100 ways. Attendant Zhu was delicate as a jade ornament. I almost wished that each of them would fall in love with the emperor, yet not a single one truly held his heart. A sudden thought surfaced in my mind. Could it be that the emperor preferred men? Consort Cecilia nodded thoughtfully. It is possible. And so we launched into a spirited debate over whether Emperor Adrian favored Prince Lucian more, or my elder brother more. At that moment, I dearly wished Consort Helena Minor were present. She would certainly have smiled triumphantly, laid out the facts, reasoned through the matter, and defeated us all. In these past days, Consort Joanne and Consort Helena Minor had both sent things to me through others. Clara Chio had come to the gate several times. Weeping, though she was not permitted to see me, what I had not expected was that Princess Florence would also send medicine and clothing. Princess Florence was the youngest daughter of the late emperor. Her birth mother had not held high status and had not been favored. Within the palace, she rarely associated with others, aside from attending upon Empress Dowager Helena. When I had first entered the palace, I once heard Consort Joanne mention in passing that Princess Florence's birthday was approaching. So I had gifted her a round silk fan embroidered with a beauty, one I had made before entering the palace, along with a few small trinkets I had brought back from Jiangnan. I had not thought she would remember such a minor kindness, and now, in my snowy winter, she was willing to send me charcoal. I had never despaired. I knew that one day, I would leave this place. My father was becoming ever more capable in the court. My aunt would surely petition the Empress Dowager on my behalf. Yet 3 months passed without a single word. Fear began to creep into my heart. I was afraid that when Clara Chio gave birth, I would not be at her side. Consort Helena Minor had said childbirth could be painful enough to kill. I had only broken 2 ribs, and the pain alone had made me cry for my father and mother for days. How much suffering would Clara Chio endure? I had to act. I requested fabric from Consort Joanne and personally sewed a new set of sleeping robes for the emperor, sending them to him. Since receiving the first 2 sets I had made, Emperor Adrian had refused to wear any made by others. I knew my workmanship was indeed quite good, deeply favored by His Majesty. I could only hope that he would remember our 3 months as roommates and show me a little mercy, but before any reply from the emperor arrived, Consort Cecilia collapsed. A fever raged through her, refusing to subside. I was terrified. All this time, she had cared for me. Now I could only pound upon the palace gates, shouting for the guards to summon Consort Joanne. At last, the imperial physician came. Yet no matter how many bowls of medicine she drank, there was no improvement. After several days, she burned with fever, drifting in delirium. I did my utmost to care for her. The 100 flowers embroidery I had promised her was still unfinished. I was afraid she would leave me as my elder cousin once had. On the 4th day of her fever, red rashes began appearing across her face and body. After examining her, the imperial physician's expression changed gravely. "This is not good," he said. "It is smallpox." He explained that perhaps the virus had lain dormant in the soil, disturbed when Consort Cecilia planted her flowers. Smallpox was highly contagious. But this was the cold palace. There was nothing here fit for proper quarantine. Consort Joanne immediately arrived bearing an imperial decree, intending to take me out at once. Yet how could I possibly abandon Consort Cecilia? Because of me, she had been beaten, her leg broken, and cast into this place. Every day, limping, she had carried clean water to wipe my body. Though attendants who had already survived smallpox had now been sent in to care for her, I stubbornly insisted on staying by her side. I was afraid that when she awoke, she would not find me there. Consort Helena Minor tried several times to persuade me from outside the gates. Clara Chio was nearing childbirth, and this matter continually agitated her. At one point, noble Consort Margaret, enraged, sent palace servants to drag me out by force. But as long as I fought desperately to remain, no one could move me. In the end, Emperor Adrian himself came. He stood outside the doors and asked, Serafina Xiao, if you die, what am I to do? If I die, then I die, I answered calmly. Prince Lucian and I will not resent your majesty. If I die, my father and mother, my cousins and kinsmen, will fulfill their filial duties in my stead. A daughter entering the palace is no different from being dead already. If I die, Prince Lucian will no longer cling to remembrance. He may marry, have children, and live out his life in peace. If I die, let it count as repaying a life to Consort Cecilia. The one who caused her fate today was me. Consort Cecilia burned with fever for 10 full days before finally awakening. The imperial physician shook his head. A final flash of light before extinction, he murmured, in the end, she too left me, just as my cousin Evelyn Xiao had. I could not bear for her to die in ignorance. At last, I spoke. You once asked me why I stood in the courtyard each night gazing at the stars. I will tell you now. I was thinking of someone. The stars resemble his eyes when he looks at me and smiles. I weep because that person is Prince Lucian. I am truly sorry. I have ruined your life. Consort Cecilia stared at me in astonishment, then she struggled to shake her head and forced a smile. I do not resent you, she whispered. You are also someone fated to suffer. And if you finish your 100 flowers embroidery, burn it for me. After saying that, she closed her eyes. I knew that those who died of smallpox would ultimately be burned to ashes, yet before they could take her away, I used clean water to gently wipe her body one last time. I dressed her properly in palace robes, arranged her hair carefully. I still remembered the first time I saw her in the imperial garden, tending blossoms with a radiant smile. I wished that in heaven she might possess a body as beautiful as she had that day, before the palace attendants had even finished burning all of Consort Cecilia's belongings. I collapsed. I knew it was my turn to repay a life. I drifted into feverish sleep, with no desire to live. I had long ceased wishing to live. From the day I learned I must enter the palace, my cousin was gone. Consort Cecilia was gone. Whether I existed in this world or not made no difference. But Vivian Wen came. In the end, they would not let me die. Vivian Wen tended to me just as she had once cared for my cousin, keeping vigil day and night. She performed acupuncture, decocted medicines, monitored my condition constantly. At the slightest change, she consulted with the imperial physicians and adjusted the prescriptions. In my delirium, I heard her clutch my hand. Weeping, begging me to survive, live, she cried. If not for yourself, then live for me. At last, my fever broke. The imperial physician exhaled in relief. I had survived. Every day, Vivian carefully applied ointment to the scabs left by the rash, little by little. She said it was thanks to her mother dragging her into endless studies of beauty-preserving remedies that she had developed this medicinal paste. After a month, the scabs fell away, leaving scarcely a trace. My strength gradually returned. Only then did Vivian Wen allow herself to leave in peace. Noble Consort Margaret and Consort Joanne came personally to escort me out of the cold palace. At the same time, they told me Clara Qiu had died. On the very night my fever broke, when Clara Qiu heard that I had contracted smallpox, her mind became unhinged with worry. She suffered a sudden hemorrhage during childbirth, delivered a prince, and then passed away. Later, noble Consort Margaret uncovered the truth. It had been Attendant Zhu who deliberately revealed news of my illness to Clara Qiu. Even earlier, when Clara Qiu had insisted on visiting her father, the Marquis of Pingyuan, it had been Attendant Zhu who encouraged her. She had wanted our lives. Attendant Zhu had entered the palace alongside us. We had never once quarreled. I could not understand why she had gone to such lengths to harm us. Consort Helena Minor said it was because attendant Zhu's mother had dared to instruct her daughter to scheme within the harem, to climb upward for the sake of her father and brother's prospects at court. Is that not madness? She said. Noble consort Margaret declared coldly, such people are like weeds in a field. The sooner they are uprooted, the better. If someone like that were allowed to rise high, how could the harem ever know peace? I had no heart left to condemn attendant Zhu. She already carried blood on her hands. In noble consort Margaret's eyes, she was as good as dead. I only hated myself. When I had willfully and recklessly stayed to guard consort Cecilia, I had completely forgotten that I was also Clara Chio's closest kin within the palace. I had failed consort Cecilia. I had failed Clara Chio. But I would live. I could not fail Vivian Wen as well. The emperor entrusted Clara Chio's second prince to me and conferred upon me the title of Ming consort. I moved into the newly restored Jian palace. I named the child Theodore. When he grew older, I would tell him that his birth mother's name was Nin Ni, my dearest friend since childhood. Thus I lived my days, watching over my little Theodore. The emperor continued to visit my palace more frequently than others. As before, he read his books while I embroidered my flowers. He slept on the bed, I slept upon the couch. Only now, I could feel that he was deliberately trying to speak with me more often. For example, he would ask whether I had any suggestions regarding my elder brother's marriage, or he would inquire about little Theodore, whether he had behaved that day, whether he had fussed. He would ask what I had eaten for lunch, whether it suited my taste. He even grew curious about the 100 variations of peony embroidery I had mastered. I answered him. One by one, I knew, just as consort Cecilia had once said, that the emperor was trying to fulfill his responsibility toward me. Yet he never once mentioned Prince Lucien again. In the past, he had not avoided the topic, but now, it was as though the name no longer existed. Until early spring, that day, Emperor Adrian told me that Prince Lucien was about to be married. At the time, I was embroidering a portrait for Princess Florence. The golden needle in my hand pierced straight through my left thumb. Blood welled without ceasing. I did not know whether it hurt. I only lowered my head, pressed the blood from my fingertip, and continued working. Tears streamed down, drop after drop. For the first time, I learned that one could cry without making a sound, without a single expression upon one's face. The emperor asked softly, "Do you hate me?" "Your Majesty, please do not speak to me," I whispered. "Can you not allow me a moment of quiet to cry?" The instant he spoke, I could no longer endure it. I threw aside the embroidery, grabbed a handkerchief, covered my face, and wept. Only after a long while did I calm myself and shake my head. "Prince Lucien does not permit me to hate your Majesty," I said. "He does not resent you. Therefore, neither will I." Only after entering the palace did I gradually understand the words once spoken by my elder cousin. My father was Minister Gregory Shao. My uncle was a great general. Between the two families, there was only one daughter, me. If I had married Prince Lucien, then all that power would have become his. No matter how deep the brotherly affection between him and the emperor, politics was no child's game. The emperor could not hand such a sharp blade to Prince Lucien. The emperor had no choice. Prince Lucien had no choice, and I had no choice. The greater tide outweighed the individual. The emperor was silent for a long moment before he spoke. "I owe you both an apology," he said quietly. "But I do not regret summoning you into the palace. On my scales, nothing may weigh heavier than the empire. Not even those I cherish most." The Empress Dowager instructed noble consort Margaret and consort Joanne to arrange Prince Lucien's marriage, yet discussion of the matter was strictly forbidden. it did not matter. Even if people had spoken of it, I would not have asked to hear. In the years that followed, Lady Alara frequently entered the palace. Clara Chio's death had shaken her deeply. She wished to spend more time with me, as though fearing that one day we too might suddenly vanish from one another's lives. Yet I always felt that whenever Lady Alara saw me, she wished to speak, only to swallow her words in the end. I had thought she meant to confide in me about Prince Lucien, but unexpectedly, she blushed and finally asked whether I might urge the emperor to hasten arrangements for my elder brother's marriage. My elder brother remained unmarried. My second brother could not wed before his elder sibling and could only follow him in remaining a bachelor. But Lady Alara, like myself, was already 17. She could not delay any longer. The emperor had once asked my opinion on the matter. At the time, I had known nothing and told him he might as well consult consort Helena Minor. After that, nothing came of it. Suddenly, a thought struck me. What about Vivian Wen? I asked Lady Alara. She is attentive and gentle, well suited to care for someone as driven as my elder brother. We grew up close. If we became sisters-in-law, we would surely live harmoniously. Lady Alara stared at me for a long while before speaking. You do not know? She asked softly. The one Prince Lucien intends to marry is Vivian Wen. I froze. Sweetness, bitterness, salt, sorrow, every emotion surged at once, impossible to name. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to say only, "That is very good. I have heard Prince Lucien is now wholly devoted to his ambitions. With Vivian to care for him, he will be well looked after." Lady Alara suddenly sprang to her feet and kicked the chair violently. What do you know? She burst out. Has Vivian Wen not always liked Prince Lucien? When you were ill with smallpox, she entered the palace to treat you because she and Prince Lucien had made an agreement. If she could save your life, he would marry her. I only learned of it later. At the time, I was deeply moved, believing she acted purely out of our childhood bond. Now, whenever I think of it, I feel a chill in my heart. I remembered how, during my fever, Vivian Wen had clasped my hand, weeping, begging me to survive, live, for her. So that had been the meaning. But my life had indeed been saved by her hands. Surely she still remembered our childhood affection. Otherwise, she would not have gone to such lengths to ensure my face bore no scars from the pox. I shook my head. I do not resent her, I said quietly. This is happiness she earned with her own ability. I even considered sending Vivian Wen an additional dowry, but in the end, I refrained. On the day of her great wedding to Prince Lucien, I should not intrude. I could only offer my most sincere blessings. My heart had long since died. All I wished was that those I loved might find happiness. A few days later came the second day of the second lunar month, the festival of the flower deity. I took the completed 100 flowers embroidery and prepared to go to the cold palace to burn it for consort Cecilia. I had not expected to encounter noble consort Margaret there. She had just finished burning several volumes of Buddhist scriptures for consort Cecilia. I was startled. When I returned, I mentioned it to consort Helena Minor. She said, "Do not be deceived by noble consort Margaret's cold, old-fashioned, unapproachable manner. In truth, she is only just past 20. Still young. Inexperienced. She does not always know the weight of her actions." When she ordered consort Cecilia to be flogged 30 strokes, she never imagined it would break her leg. Later, she felt deep regret. Did you not notice? When you were sent to the cold palace, she never once had you beaten. And what of Lord Qi? I asked. The Assistant Minister of Revenue, Consort Cecilia's father? He has been demoted to a distant post in Chaozhou, Consort Helena Minor replied. I frowned. She stared at me, then sighed. You still do not understand. That was merely coincidence. Lord Qi was demoted because he embezzled disaster relief funds. The emperor is not someone who confuses right and wrong. He will not punish court officials for the mistakes of concubines. Nor will he promote a woman's family simply because he favors her. Which is why I said Attendant Zhu must have lost her mind. Has she not seen that Consort Joanne bore the first prince, and yet her elder brother remains only a fourth-rank official? In this lifetime, he will never enter the central administration. I realized that although Consort Helena Minor did not flatter the emperor, she always seemed to approve of him. Do you love the emperor? I asked. She shot me a sideways glance. Where does all this talk of love come from? Not everyone is fated as you and Prince Lucian were. She lowered her head and sighed, then continued. Before I entered the palace, my mother told me, the glory of our family is for the men in court to earn. My only wish is to live peacefully in the harem. If the emperor cherishes me, I will not fail him. If he does not, then I must not fail myself. Does he cherish you? I asked, let us say. He does, she replied lightly. But between the emperor and me, there is little to say. It is not like with you sisters, chattering together each day. When I gave birth to the first princess, he stood outside my chambers all night. Only then did I know he truly cared. But I also understood that such care came from a strong sense of responsibility. I endured the pain of childbirth and gave him a daughter. That, too, was my duty fulfilled. She shook her head again. If I truly loved him, perhaps I would wish to bear more children for him. But now, each time I attend him at night, I fear becoming pregnant again. It hurt too much. In this lifetime, I do not wish to endure that pain a second time. Then she suddenly beamed at me. Fortunately, ever since you entered the palace, the emperor has visited me far less. But I do find it strange. He is only 22 this year, full of vigor. And yet, each night, faced with a beauty as radiant as you, he can restrain himself. You ought to accept him sooner, she teased. Do not let the emperor suppress himself into illness. That would be a grave misfortune for the nation. I had not expected her to turn the conversation so abruptly. My face burned red as I pinched her arm in protest. After our laughter subsided, Consort Helena Minor grew serious. Tell me honestly, she said. Tomorrow night, shall I come stay with you at Jian Palace? Tomorrow night was Prince Lucian's wedding night. I shook my head. On the night of Prince Lucian's marriage, I sat alone in the courtyard, gazing at the stars until dawn. Again and again, I told myself, let go, forget, move forward. Even if I cannot let go, even if I cannot forget, I must move forward. The palace servants later told me that at midnight, the emperor came and stood outside my gates for a long while before leaving. Perhaps he had wished to comfort me. Or perhaps he thought it better that the instigator himself not appear, at daybreak. I made up my mind and went to Ningxiu Palace. Vivian Wen would surely come that morning to pay her respects to Empress Dowager Helena. I wanted to see her. I wanted to speak openly. After that, life would continue. But when I arrived at Ningxiu Palace, I received the news. Vivian Wen was dead, poisoned. The culprit was a maidservant in Prince Lucian's residence who had long harbored secret affection for him. Out of jealousy toward Vivian Wen, She had laced the bridal wine with poison. My blood boiled. Without thinking, I ran straight to the Hall of Mental Cultivation. I demanded that the Emperor investigate who had prepared the poison. How it had been smuggled into the prince's residence. Whose hands it had passed through. What the guards had been doing when the maid administered it. I could not believe Vivian had died so easily. She was proficient in medicine. How could she fail to detect the scent of poison in wine and drink it without question? After hearing me out, the Emperor did not answer. He simply said, "Go inside and fetch the book at the head of the bed. I will come presently." Inside was the Emperor's private bedchamber. My blood surged. At such a moment, he still asked me to fetch a book for him, yet suddenly, my heart began pounding wildly. A faint, uncertain premonition rose within me. Holding my breath, I pushed the door open. Prince Lucian stood inside. It had been a year since I last saw him. Perhaps from constant military training, he seemed slightly taller, his features more composed. But when he looked at me, his eyes were still gentle, shining like a vast, brilliant galaxy. I clenched my fists, struggling to restrain the impulse to throw myself into his arms. Prince Lucian remained where he stood and spoke calmly. "I knew I could not hide it from you. Vivian had been poisoned by Prince Lucian. He had married her because she had saved my life. She had been his benefactor, and he had killed her because he had discovered that years ago, it was she who had slipped chronic poison into my cousin's medicine. She had caused my cousin's death, all so that I would enter the palace. So that I would never be with Prince Lucian." My hands and feet turned ice cold. Darkness crept over my vision. Prince Lucian stepped forward and caught me before I could fall. "If I could shield you for the rest of your life," he said softly, "I would willingly cover your eyes, so you would never have to see how frightening the human heart can be. But today I can only tell you to open your eyes. Look carefully at these treacherous hearts. From now on, you must learn to protect yourself." When I withdrew, Emperor Adrian was seated at his desk, lost in thought. I had never seen him so absent-minded before. I called out to him gently. He came back to himself and said, "Return now. I have already summoned Lady Alara to enter the palace to see you." I bowed my head. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He glanced at me, then smiled faintly. He understood that between us, at last, there was reconciliation. Little Crown Prince Theodore had learned to turn over by himself. When I teased him, Emperor Adrian would stand to one side, watching us with a tender smile. He still came often to my palace, although there was still nothing between us. I did not know when it began, but I gradually sensed that the Emperor regarded me differently from the others. He seemed to have grown fond of me. If he liked me, then so be it. After all, to be liked was far better than to be disliked. In the late days of spring, I gathered many blossoms that Consort Cecilia had once planted. I dried them carefully and placed them into scented sachets. Then Consort Joanne suddenly invited me to visit Princess Florence. She said the princess might soon be sent north in a political marriage. War had broken out along the northern frontier. The court had taken the initiative to seek peace. At present, among the imperial princesses of marriageable age, only Princess Florence remained. Consort Joanne and I discussed countless words of comfort along the way, yet when we arrived before Princess Florence, she merely held her white cat in her arms and said calmly, "I am a princess. Since childhood, I have lived in silk and jade, enjoying the people's tribute. Today, it is only right that I sacrifice my own happiness in exchange for their peace. That has always been my mission." Her resolute words were strikingly similar to Emperor Adrian's. I had thought she would weep in grief and resentment. I had underestimated her, yet my heart ached for her. The northern lands were bitterly cold. I set aside the half-finished clothes I had been sewing for little Crown Prince Theodore and began instead to hurry through making scarves, fur collars, gloves, and padded boots. Only if they were sewn by my own hands. Only if Princess Florence carried them north herself, would I feel even slightly at ease. Reports from the frontier grew increasingly dire. The emperor became ever more occupied. His visits to the harem grew fewer. Occasionally he still came to me. I began to prepare nourishing tonics for him, fearing he might exhaust his health. When he came, he did nothing but continue reviewing memorials. I would sit beside him, embroidering quietly. At times he would lift his eyes and see that I was sewing a pair of gloves. Puzzled, he asked, "Winter is still far away. Why are you making these?" "I wish to give them to Princess Florence when she departs for the northern lands," I replied. He paused, then smiled. "Tell Florence to set her mind at ease. Defending the nation is the duty of men. How could I possibly sacrifice my little sister?" With that, he lowered his head again and returned to his memorials. I stared at his figure bent beneath the lamplight, astonished. We had known each other for more than a year, and yet, it felt as though I had never truly understood him. When I repeated the emperor's words to Princess Florence, she finally broke into tears. She only said, "I never expected this. I have never been particularly close to Imperial brother." I held her in my arms and comforted her for a long while. At last, I asked half in jest, "Then will you return to me all the dowry I prepared for you?" It was my grandmother's life savings, gathered over many years. The emperor later summoned me to bring Crown Prince Theodore to the Hall of Mental Cultivation. When I arrived, I saw a stout man standing beneath the long corridor, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. Joy flooded me. I hurried forward. "Father." Minister Gregory Shao looked both delighted and startled, yet he did not forget to bow. "Your servant greets Consort Serafina." I quickly helped him up. I noticed strands of silver now threading through his temples, and my heart tightened. Then I saw that he was using the handkerchief I had embroidered before entering the palace. My chest grew even heavier. "Father, that handkerchief is old." He hurriedly stuffed it into his sleeve and laughed awkwardly. "Your mother never learned to sew such things. I've been making do." I took Crown Prince Theodore from his nurse and placed him into my father's arms so he could see his grandson. He teased the child twice, then said gently, "Go inside. The child's maternal grandfather is within." With that, he withdrew. When I entered the Hall of Mental Cultivation, as expected, Marquis Pignuan was inside discussing military affairs with the emperor. The moment Marquis Pignuan saw me carrying Crown Prince Theodore, his eyes reddened. After he completed his formal salute, I glanced at Emperor Adrian. He gave a faint nod, so I told Marquis Pignuan to hold his grandson, but he did not accept the child. Instead, he knelt and declared, "This old minister is deeply moved and forever grateful for the grace of your majesty and consort Serafina. In this campaign to the northern frontier, I shall devote myself wholly, and if need be, die in service." At last, Emperor Adrian had dispatched troops north for a decisive battle. My elder cousin would serve as the vanguard. Marquis Pignuan, as an experienced old general, would command from the rear. My father would remain in the capital, overseeing military provisions to ensure steady supplies. And the supreme commander was Prince Lucien. He had personally volunteered to lead the campaign. On the day the Grand Army set out, Emperor Adrian broke precedent and brought me up onto the city walls to watch. Prince Lucien stood below in silver armor, majestic and solemn, his gaze steady and resolute. That same resolute look, I had seen it on Emperor Adrian's face. I had seen it on Princess Florence's, and now, I saw it on Prince Lucien. for more than a decade. He had lived carefree and unburdened, roaming freely and laughing without restraint, but now, this was the moment he bore the mission of the imperial clan upon his shoulders. The first to notice me was my elder cousin. He lifted a hand and waved gently. Prince Lucian followed his gaze and looked up. We were too far apart for clear features, but somehow, I could tell, just like when we first met. He gave me a brilliant smile. Then he spurred his horse forward and rode away, without once turning back. As I watched his figure on horseback recede into the distance, a sudden premonition seized my heart. He would not return, whether alive or dead. He would not return. He no longer needed me. Even on the night of his wedding, I had never felt this way. But now, I felt it with painful clarity. He no longer needed me. He would go far away, and never come back. He no longer needed me. My body gave way. I collapsed and coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood. Perhaps Emperor Adrian thought I was on the brink of death, for he lost all composure. He gathered me in his arms and hurried back to Zhuyan Palace, summoning imperial physicians until the chamber was filled. They took turns examining my pulse. Yet none could determine the cause. At last, they offered a unified conclusion. Your Highness has been troubled by excessive worry and fatigue. Her blood is unsettled and not flowing smoothly. A few days of rest and recuperation will suffice. In the harem, those truly overworked were noble consort Margaret and consort Joanne. I lived each day in comfort and ease. I had never labored, yet the physicians could only offer such words. They could hardly declare that I suffered from an ailment of the heart. Once assured I was not gravely ill, Emperor Adrian returned to his duties. After the army departed, affairs at court grew heavier and more chaotic, though he was still in the prime of youth. I could sense that he was gradually becoming strained, as if the burdens were beginning to outweigh his strength. Still, he remembered my illness. Whenever he found a spare moment, he came to see me. I told him I was fine. I did not wish to become a weight upon him while he was laboring over matters of state. He hesitated, then said softly, "How could you ever be a burden? When I am weary from affairs of court, a single glance at you is enough to lighten my heart." Later, Consort Helena Minor clicked her tongue and said teasingly, "Who would have thought our emperor, who has seen so much of the world, could still be so naive?" State affairs were grave. I truly did not wish him to divide his attention because of me, so I began to visit the Hall of Mental Cultivation on my own, bringing ginseng broth or small delicacies. My father, Minister Gregory Shao, was often detained late into the night discussing military provisions with the emperor. At times like that, to share a bowl of soup with him felt like fulfilling my filial duty. That thought alone warmed my heart, ever since news spread that Princess Florence might be sent in marriage to the north. The atmosphere within the harem had grown heavy. Thus, at the end of the 5th month, Consort Helena Minor encouraged noble consort Margaret to host a birthday banquet for the second princess. To lift everyone's spirits, Consort Helena Minor adored lively gatherings. At every palace banquet, she wished she could summon every noble lady and young miss of the capital to Qingdan Palace to crack melon seeds and, incidentally, update her store of information. But noble consort Margaret insisted that now was not the time for extravagance. A simple gathering among the women of the harem would suffice. I had already made many things for the second princess over time. This occasion required something more valuable. So I selected an antique gold longevity lock as my gift. When I presented it, noble consort Margaret looked surprised. "I thought the embroidered shoes on that table were from you." A palace maid hurried to clarify, "Those were sent by Attendant Juan." I picked up the tiny embroidered shoes and examined them carefully. They were exquisitely intricate, far too elaborate. To complete such a pair would require at least 2 or 3 months. I would never devote so much effort to making such delicate shoes for a child. Children grow quickly. Before long, they would outgrow them, and all that labor would be wasted. Yet Attendant Juan was willing to expend such care. I once heard Consort Helena Minor mention that Attendant Juan and Consort Gabriel were cousins, from the same clan. Since childhood, they had competed for everything. Their relationship had never been harmonious, and yet today, Attendant Juan had poured so much thought into the daughter of Consort Gabriel. That evening, I praised Attendant Juan's craftsmanship and thoughtfulness. She replied lightly, "It is nothing. Merely something to pass the time, unlike your highness." Then noble Lady Ho beside her added with a faint smile, "How could Consort Serafina be the same as you? His Majesty always visits Juyun Palace. Consort Serafina must be very busy indeed." Noble Consort Margaret's expression changed. "Noble Lady Ho, are you lacking food or clothing in this palace? Why speak such resentful words?" Startled, noble Lady Ho stammered, her eyes reddening. "I meant no resentment. I only wished to flatter Consort Serafina. I was wrong." Noble Consort Margaret's face softened slightly. "If you do not know what to say, learn from Lady Li and remain silent." Noble Lady Ho sniffled pitifully for a while. I felt somewhat embarrassed, fortunately. Consort Helena Minor deftly changed the subject, and noble Consort Margaret soon called for the cards. After the banquet, perhaps feeling she had offended me earlier, noble Lady Ho insisted on pulling me into a game of leaf cards to mend relations. I asked her repeatedly, "Are you certain you want me to play?" Noble Lady Ho, Attendant Juan, and Lady Lu Baolin nodded in unison, so I took my seat. 8 bamboo. Pung of 3 myriads. Added 5 circles. I discarded. I won. Several rounds passed exactly the same way. Noble Lady Ho, Attendant Juan, and Lady Lu Baolin exchanged glances of disbelief. So I took my seat. 8 bamboo. Pung of 3 myriads. Added 5 circles. I discarded. I won. Several rounds passed exactly the same way. Noble Lady Ho, Attendant Juan, and Lady Lu Baolin exchanged glances of disbelief. I shrugged helplessly. My grandmother, my aunts, and my mother all loved playing leaf cards. I had grown up at their side. Since childhood, I had watched them play. Whenever they were short of a player, they would pull me to the table. I never understood why, but it was as though the god of gambling possessed me. Whatever tile I lacked, I drew. Whatever others discarded, I claimed. I did not even need to think. Victory simply piled up before me. Every time was the same. Eventually, they refused to let me join. Winning without effort brought me no sense of accomplishment anyway, so I stopped playing. Now, seeing me crush them so utterly, noble Lady Ho clenched her teeth. "It seems we can only unleash our ultimate move." She dragged Lady Li Rongyuan over. Lady Li did not like to speak, but her mind was sharp. She preferred to sit quietly and calculate. It was said she was undefeated in leaf cards throughout the capital. When she heard that my luck bordered on the miraculous, she grew interested and took her seat opposite me. And indeed, true skill was stronger than blind fortune. Naturally, I lost, though the match was grueling and winding. Leaving Lady Li drenched in sweat, it was my first defeat. How could I accept that? So we continued. The hour grew late. Consort Helena Minor and Consort Joanne had already departed, yet I remained seated. The others had no choice but to accompany me for another round. This time I was far more nervous. I dared not discard casually. Only then did I realize I did not know how to count tiles at all. I stared at my hand, from left to right, then right to left. I glanced at Lady Li, who was watching me intently. The pressure mounted until I scarcely dared to play a single tile. Just then, a firm voice sounded behind me, 6 myriads. 6 myriads it was. I threw it down. Only afterward did I realize the speaker was Emperor Adrian himself. I started to rise and bow, but he pressed a hand to my shoulder, signaling for us to continue. Lady Li's fighting spirit flared. She carefully discarded a 4 bamboo. Under the Emperor's quiet instructions, I played several more turns. With his intellect and my fortune combined, we advanced steadily. Victory was within reach. Suddenly, I tossed down my tiles. No more. I refuse. 2 against 1. What kind of heroism is that? With the Emperor present, no one truly wished to continue anyway. The table dissolved at once. Having won, I was in high spirits. Your Majesty knows how to play as well? He smiled. When I was young, I often accompanied my mother. Then he asked, where is the second princess? Noble consort Margaret replied, the wet nurse has taken her to sleep. The Emperor nodded and turned to me. I shall go see her. Return to Zhuyun Palace and wait for me. He was still in noble consort Margaret's palace. If he came to mine, and nothing happened, what would be the point? I hurriedly said, Your Majesty, my health is not convenient tonight. Another day I shall attend you. The Emperor gave a helpless smile. Very well. Noble consort Margaret understood my intent. She seemed quite satisfied by my refusal to curry favor. Casting me an approving glance before turning to him, my health is also unwell today, Your Majesty. Where will you go tonight? Perhaps she truly felt unwell. For a fleeting moment, I felt the Emperor was rather pitiful, so I silently accompanied him to see the second princess, then led him back to Zhuyun Palace. Not long after, noble Lady Ho became pregnant. Empress Dowager Helena was overjoyed, but noble consort Margaret developed a headache. She personally brought noble Lady Ho into her own palace to care for her, swearing that within this harem, no one would be permitted to scheme against the imperial heir. Consort Helena Minor clicked her tongue admiringly. His Majesty is truly robust. He has not fallen ill from such exertions. Gradually, whispers began to circulate. Noble Lady Ho had conceived after only 2 or 3 months of seeing the Emperor. As for me, though I was considered the most favored, more than a year had passed without any sign of pregnancy. Was there something wrong with my body? Right on cue, Consort Helena Minor spread a counter-rumor. Do you not see that His Majesty cannot spend a day without Consort Seraphina? If she were to become pregnant, which of you could possibly satisfy him then? From that day forward, for the 10,000th time, I swore to sever all ties with Consort Helena Minor. In mid-June, my elder brother Alexander Shao was married. My new sister-in-law was the granddaughter of Minister Wang of the Ministry of Rights, a woman I had carefully selected together with Consort Helena Minor after much deliberation. Gentle, considerate, well-mannered. 2 months later, Lady Alara finally married my second brother, Nathaniel Shao, as she had long wished. When she later entered the palace with my aunt to visit me, she behaved demurely and elegantly, all soft courtesy and lowered lashes. I could not help laughing. She hid behind my aunt, blinking at me repeatedly. By autumn, the Emperor's brow furrowed ever deeper. The northern weather had grown bitterly cold. He worried his soldiers would not withstand such extremes. He often discussed matters with my father late into the night. Thus, Empress Dowager Helena decided to lead the 4 principal consorts to the imperial temple to pray for blessings upon the northern troops. When I went to Qingdan Palace to consult with Consort Helena Minor about this matter, I found Attendant One inside, weeping. She had received news that Consort Gabrielle, now demoted to Lady Gua, was unlikely to survive. Lady Gua had been expelled from the palace after giving birth. Her constitution had already been weak, and her proud temperament made the blow even harder to bear. The conditions at the imperial temple were far inferior to those within the palace. After a full winter had passed, more than half of the buildings were already in disrepair. Lady Gua's health had deteriorated greatly. And each day, her unceasing worry for the second princess only made matters worse. Attendant One said softly, "Though I quarreled with her since childhood, we are still family. When she behaved foolishly in the past, I tried to persuade her. She only thought I was jealous and refused to listen. Now she has fallen to such an end." She paused, wiping her tears. If His Majesty had gone with her, what difference would it have made? Who would dare utter even a single word against the Emperor? After discussing with Consort Helena Minor, I proposed to noble Consort Margaret that when she went to the temple, she might bring the second princess along, so Lady Gua could see her child one last time. When the matter was raised, noble Consort Margaret agreed, "Very well. Let her see clearly that I have not mistreated her daughter." The prayer ceremony proceeded smoothly. After it concluded, we returned to the palace with Empress Dowager Helena. As promised, noble Consort Margaret carried the second princess to visit Lady Gua. No one knew what was said between them. It was only reported that afterward, Lady Gua passed away peacefully. In the 12th month, at last, news of victory arrived. Prince Lucien had won a great triumph. The enemy forces had retreated along the entire front. The stone that had weighed upon Emperor Adrian's heart for over half a year finally fell away. That evening, he did not stay up late reviewing memorials. Instead, he came early to Zhuyun Palace to accompany me. While I embroidered, he read storybooks aloud with surprising enthusiasm. The following year, when the Grand Army returned in triumph, my elder cousin came back. Marquis Pignuan returned. But Prince Lucien did not. He would not return. He had chosen to remain stationed in the north, to guard the frontier and secure peace for Emperor Adrian. I did not cry. That day upon the city walls, he had already bid me farewell. He no longer needed me, and I no longer needed him. The Emperor wished to grant Marquis Pignuan a marquisate title, but Marquis Pignuan had only Clara Xiu and no male heir to carry on the line. He declined the honor and requested only permission to retire to his hometown in peace. I promised him that when Crown Prince Theodore grew older, would send him to visit, so they might rest easy. Marquis Pignuan was deeply moved and thanked me again and again. As for my elder cousin, he became my brother-in-law. He married Princess Florence. The Emperor took me to attend their wedding banquet. The princess had not been sacrificed to a fire-breathing dragon. Instead, she married the warrior who had braved countless dangers. I was truly happy. That night, I dragged Lady Elara into drinking with me until we were thoroughly intoxicated. In the end, I vomited all over the Emperor inside the carriage. As he frowned and removed his outer robe, I grinned and told him I had done it on purpose. He sighed helplessly, tossing the soiled cloak aside. "I know," he said quietly, "that you will hate me for the rest of your life." Consort Helena Minor urged me daily to stop resisting and accept the Emperor sooner. I was not a fool. How could I fail to sense how well he treated me? Since childhood, Emperor Adrian had lifted Prince Lucien high above all others. Yet when the stability of the realm was at stake, he personally crushed Prince Lucien's happiness. The Emperor had already treated me generously. He made me a consort. He gave me a son. I was content. I did not wish to ask for more. In early April, under noble consort Margaret's strict supervision, noble Lady Ho safely carried her pregnancy to term and gave birth to the third princess. She was promoted to the rank of Chongrong. This year was filled with joyous events. Noble consort Margaret proposed to the emperor that a grand full-month celebration be held for the third princess. To add further festivity, even Empress Dowager Helena, who had remained displeased since Prince Lucian chose not to return, attended the palace banquet. At the banquet, my seat was beside Consort Joanne. Crown Prince Theodore, now over a year old, could walk on his own. He toddled repeatedly toward the first prince. Clutching at his leg and looking up with a foolish grin, I carried him back several times, but he fussed and insisted on returning. At last, I lost my temper slightly. Only then did Crown Prince Theodore obediently curl into my arms to eat. The first prince, however, was frightened by my outburst. "Carefully," he said, "Consort Seraphina, please do not scold little brother." At 5 years old, he still called me Consort Seraphina. Consort Joanne had corrected him many times, yet he stubbornly persisted. I gently comforted him. "It is all right. Your younger brother is strong." At that moment, a troupe of dancers in red entered, their sleeves fluttering as they began to perform. Since infancy, Crown Prince Theodore had loved the color red. He stared at them unblinkingly, occasionally pointing and giggling. As I coaxed him, a sudden flash crossed my vision. The dancer nearest me drew a dagger from somewhere within her garments and lunged straight toward me. There was no time to evade. Instinctively, I turned my body to shield Crown Prince Theodore and retreated backward, never expecting that Emperor Adrian, who had been seated before Consort Joanne, would rush forward and embrace us both first. Fortunately, his reflexes were swift. The blade only sliced through his sleeve. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.